No.
They said I can use my phone. Oh shit, there's no headphone. No headphones around here.
No.
I'll try this because I'm going to try it from my computer. Oh, what's this here?
How are you, Di?
I'm well, and you?
Yeah, nice to see you.
Yeah, how's Joe?
She's good. She's sitting next to me here. You'll hear her clacking on the keyboard.
Okay, and the boy is doing well.
Boys are doing well depending on the day.
Okay, I see from time to time what you're doing. So you're keeping him under control in the garden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think all of us are just living day to day at the moment with homeschooling.
Yeah. Not easy.
No, it's the real deal.
Hey, David. Marco.
How's it, Marco?
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
You too. You're looking fresh. It's early in the morning.
Friday, we made it through the week, another week.
And this was a long week.
No, this did feel like a long week compared to some of the others, yeah. Ren, will you just give me a cue when you want to start?
Yeah, I think we'll just give everyone another minute and then I'm going to get started.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're going to get started. Dave, you good? So I just wanted to just say good morning to everybody and a big welcome to you all and especially to you, Dave, David Smollan, CEO of Smollan Group. We really are so grateful that you've given of your time this morning and just for everybody else's benefit, Smollan's employs about 80,000 people globally. Most people will not know that Smollan's is the force behind the perfectly packed supermarket shelves all over the world. So no doubt COVID-19 has had a major impact on supply chains everywhere, and Dave's going to talk us through that a little bit, and also just share some of his thoughts on how to navigate a business through crisis. So thank you, Dave. I'm going to pass over to you in a minute. Just some housekeeping. If everybody could keep on mute while Dave's talking, please. And if you have any questions or comments, please just post them in the chat group, and there will be time afterwards where we'll go through do a Q&A and go through everybody's comments and questions. Over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Bren. And yeah, good morning, everybody. And it's quite crazy that, you know, if you wanted to organize something like this before, you would have had to get like a venue and get everybody together. And, you know, just think about like the cumulative amount of travel and time that it would have taken to actually do this. And we'll probably achieve, I don't know, maybe 70 or 80% of what we had set out to achieve, but in like 10% of the time and energy and effort. So there are some sort of, I think, real big learnings out of this. I've got a presentation which I'll go through with you, and I'll try and get through that in, I don't know, maybe 25 minutes to 30 minutes so that we can leave a decent amount of time for questions. I prefer to be asked questions than to talk. So I'll just share my screen with you guys, and hopefully what I aim to go through with you today is just tell you a little bit about our business and, what it's like for us in a crisis like this and the things that we're doing. And then, just some thoughts that I've got for companies, going through all of this. So let's give this a go and we'll see how we go. Bren, will you give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen? Okay. Okay, great. Okay. So starting out, so our business, Smollan, is what we call a retail solutions company. So we have a wide variety of different solutions in retail, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what we do. So today, what I'll talk about is just our context in this crisis, sort of how we are thinking about the crisis, the impact that it's had on our business, what we're doing about it, and then just sharing with you some conclusions and hopefully maybe some takeaways that could be of use to you in navigating it either for yourself or the people that you are helping through this unbelievably, amazingly difficult, challenging, bizarre time that we're living through. So just a quick quick background on the group. Our business is actually quite old. It was started by my late grandfather in 1931. He was the second child of a family of immigrants, and really he started out as he was a Springbok rugby player, as many of you who know my parents and the family know, and he missed the cut for making the Springbok team, and the ref had a paint company and really put him into business as a commission-based sales rep, but not an employee. And it was quite unique at the time because you didn't really have any form of outsourcing relationship in those days. And so having an outsourced sales rep was quite a novel, in a way, innovation at the time, where you had somebody who would sell on your behalf, but not actually be in your employment. And so he built that up, and between sort of the 30s and the 70s, and in fact, we were reflecting on it in the business a little while back, there was this extraordinary period during the Second World War where he actually left his company and went to fight in Algeria and left the business to his brother, and basically was out of touch for sort of months and months and years. And I was reflecting how, people talk about this crisis as being the closest that they've seen to a war in terms of impact and the impact that it's having on everybody. I mean, I can only imagine what it must have been like for him, going away from the company, not being able to, working remotely, but not having any form of contact other than the occasional letter to know what was going on in the business. So technology has actually made us a lot better off today in terms of what we're able to achieve in a crisis like this. And that's one of the things I want to talk about a little bit later, is the impact of technology in navigating this. So in the 60s, late 60s, was when my father actually joined the company, and he had a look at what was happening in modern trade in America. And the supermarkets in the US had really started to develop with Walmart, and he saw that brands that were in a supermarket, actually, if you didn't look after the brand in the supermarket would leave the shelves empty and open, and you would not have availability, and you actually wouldn't sell your product. So what he started developing was a set of services for brand owners like Unilever or Tiger brands to help them make sure that their products were well presented. Yeah, I just want to check that we've got okay, we had a bit of resonance there. So he was helping them make sure that their products were available in stores, and really developed a whole industry in South Africa around that, representing many of the biggest consumer goods companies in South Africa: Unilever, Tiger, Pioneer Foods, Premier, and really developed that for years, and became a real expert in this activity and built a whole suite of services in helping brands present themselves well for consumers in retail. So that was, call it the second generation. I'm myself and my brother are in the business today. We are we're the third generation, who probably the riskiest generation of all. And I joined the business in about 2008. And really what we recognized was that there was an opportunity to do what we're doing in South Africa globally. And over the last decade, we've really been expanding the business around the world with the help of our partners in America and the UK to conduct the kind of activities that we're doing here around the world. So I don't really want to talk more than that, because I rather focus on the crisis than the business. But just quickly, the things that we do. So we have a business that does advisory services, so helping people, advising people on what they should do in retail. Then we have a business that people have outsourced either their sales force or their in-store execution. We have a marketing business, which is about in-store demonstrations or several below-the-line advertising companies. We have a big technology business that underpins a lot of what we do, and we have an e-commerce business, which we support brands in e-commerce, and we actually have invested in several sort of e-commerce and related.
Why don't you join us? It might be interesting.
So hopefully, well, it's a compliment. I'm pleased to hear that. Okay. So that's kind of what we do as an organization, and we do this in sort of many places around the world today. So this is our footprint around the world. So all the darked out bits are where we actually conduct activities. Now, North America, as I mentioned to you, we've got this American partner called Advantage, and they are a shareholder in our group. So we don't work in North America. The gray bits are Eastern and Western Europe, where we have a JV with Advantage. It's called Advantage Smollan, and those are the countries that we represented in. And then the dark blue bits are the countries that are the Smollan business. So together, between us and Advantage, we operate, as a global company, and we probably are the largest sales and marketing in retail organization in the world. I also would like to mention that WPP is a minority shareholder in the group, and they also have played a massive role in helping us develop the international footprint of the group. So that's really just a little bit about where we are. This is just a clip out of our creds, which is over 80,000 passionate people, going for 89 years. We have presence in nearly 900,000 retail outlets globally, 5 continents and 60 countries, and we engage with about 8 million shoppers per annum. So a huge amount of activity, as you can imagine. So could we be more exposed to the coronavirus? And this has been, our business, if you look at the footprint and what we do and how we operate, you probably couldn't find a worse business in terms of, participating in a world where you've got such a virus. And the complication that we've got is that we have to provide our services because they're all essential services. And if you don't have continuity in retail and you don't have people performing these services in retail, you have absolute chaos. So it's been an unbelievable time to sort of think about how you navigate a business that you have to operate through a situation like this. So let me get into how we sort of have thought about this crisis. And, many people around the world have spoken about phases, and this was sort of our early thinking, where everyone you started out with containment around the world. And what we saw, with the exception of Sweden, I think that's the only market that we saw that did not actually have a lockdown. But in the beginning, I remember chatting with my wife, Jo, and one of her friends had said they're going to lock down South Africa, and I said there's no ways they're going to lock down South Africa. And I genuinely at that sort of early time didn't think that we were going to be in a lockdown. And then when we went into lockdown, I didn't think that we were going to be in a lockdown for as long as we are today. And we saw this pattern everywhere around the world, that nobody could see how bad it was going to get. And we've started to see around the world now, particularly it started first in China, the kind of early signs of relaxation. And we now are seeing in our European businesses, the markets are starting to relax, because the lockdown really is effective in terms of targeting the spread of the virus. But as we're seeing in South Africa, it has this incredible impact on the economy. And the way I would say you think about this is, like a fire on Table Mountain. You've got the firefighters, and you can lock down the fire and you extinguish the fire. But at the same time as extinguishing the fire, you extinguish the economy. And so what this virus needs to propagate itself is it needs contact. So like a fire, there's fuel and then there's oxygen. Now, the fuel for this virus is people, and the oxygen is proximity. But as you extinguish the virus, so you extinguish the economy. So the relaxation is probably the most tricky phase, I would say, to navigate, because the lockdown is quite short and intense. But you start to see this relaxation, and we had this initial view that the markets would relax and go back to normal. But what we're seeing around the world is not going to be the case. There is no new normal. There's going to be no new normal until such time as we get a vaccine. And that's probably 12 to 18 months away. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be living in this phase of disrupted normal, if you want to call it that, whatever you want to call it. You're going to be living in a sort of a quasi-lockdown phase for probably 12 to 18 months. And as you see a fire flare up, so you're going to see a lockdown happen. And so this is what we've been tracking around the world, the different markets, and watching, the trends. And the big things were the time frame for lockdown between the first case and lockdown, and then the extent of the lockdown. And what we're seeing now in India, and I think you could see the same thing start to happen in South Africa, is where you have a red, amber, and a green zone. And the minute you have a outbreak, the zone goes to red. So in India, they can't afford to lock down the economy, but the minute they have an outbreak, they make it a red zone. So if you look at, for example, the stats in South Africa and the Western Cape compared to the rest of the country, you can see the Western Cape is red versus the Gauteng or inland region, where there are less than half the cases with a significantly higher population. So something is not right in the Western Cape, whether we're doing more testing or it's spreading quicker. But we definitely, you definitely can afford to unlock a bit more in the inland region than you can in Western Cape. So I guess the key message around this is we don't think that this is going to return to normal for quite some time. And we are gearing the business for 12 to 18 months of managing through a very different time frame. Now, that's the one kind of key message. The second is that if we do have 12 to 18 months of managing differently, there are going to be significant permanent changes that happen after that. Because if you just had 3 to 4 weeks of lockdown, people would rebound to normal activity quite quickly. But in 12 to 18 months, there can be quite a lot of innovation that takes place that either permanently kills some businesses or activities or permanently creates others. So for the first model that we thought about in terms of analyzing the company or the different types of businesses was thinking about, on the one side, the type of business. So is it annuity or project-based? so recurring or projects. And then in terms of classification, essential or non-essential. Now, around the world, you're seeing a slightly different definition of essential and non-essential, but at the core of essential would be food, home care, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, clothing. In South Africa, tobacco and alcohol have been deemed non-essential. Those people that are responsible for homeschooling will debate whether those are non-essential or essential items. But let's say for now, they're non-essential. And then, thinking project-based, and you can apply this to actually any aspect of your business, even a function like HR or any internal function. So depending on where it is in the grid, there's a different kind of a shock that you start to see. I just ask Eric if you can mute, because we're seeing either a demand shock. So if something is in the red block, demand just drops off, or a supply shock, because if you're in the green block, you have to supply, but you've got massive difficulties in supply. So, if you take somebody like Checkers or Pick and Pay, they've got a lot of business in annuity and essential, but they really have got a lot of difficulty in actually fulfilling the supply chain, people getting to work. So how you handle the crisis is depending on where you are. And I would say that applying this kind of analysis to a business or portfolio of businesses can help you think through the different kinds of actions that are needed. And so demand and supply are the first thing to look at, and then having a look at profitability, but importantly, cash flow. So, the demand and supply impact on the commercial viability of the business in the short term, but then there is the adaptation to the new circumstances, and think about how you do that. And, one of the companies that I thought was quite interesting is Bottles, the app that was an on-demand delivery business, but basically in alcohol, and their demand was basically turned off because it was a non-essential service. And it was incredible how quickly they adapted to the new circumstances and opened up where there was demand into groceries, and landed up mutating their business and being able to fulfill that. And I think that's a great model. And they're a small company. And that's one of the things that I'll talk about a bit later, is that small companies are adapting much faster than big companies in this crisis. But the important thing is that thinking about this, it's not a one-off shock. It's going to endure for quite a long time in this way. So the second thing I'd say is managing demand, I think, is one of the most important things. So building a successful sales function is critical, whatever business you are in. Relationships first, opportunities next, sales next. And in building a sales function, what I find is people often put themselves under a lot of pressure to actually establish a contact and make a sale, but actually use the time to build relationships, because the relationships will yield opportunities, and the opportunities will yield sales. And I think it's very intimidating to sell. And if you just not think of, I'm going to sell, but I'm going to build a relationship, it's much less intimidating to do. And out of the relationships, sales will flow. And so it's a very important principle of sales. And think about, like Bottles, how businesses can be repurposed to meet new needs, because there's obviously a design or a logic under each business, but if you can mutate the business to meet a new need, I think it can be very, very successful. And I'll speak a little bit later about tone of voice, because I think in a crisis like this, there are a lot of people trying to mutate their business. And there are two things. I remember once attending a lecture in India where it was the editor of Cosmopolitan, and she said, when you come to India, you can very easily misunderstand the culture of India. She said, you might come and feel everyone's trying to do a deal with you or sell to you in India. It's very vibrant and there's a lot of activity. And she said, don't be put off by that. Understand that what sits behind every attempt is somebody who sees the opportunity to make their life better. And that's all that they're trying to do. And if we in India see a small light in the door, we will be pushing at that door to open it because it means a better life. And I remember I never thought of it differently. I never thought of it the same after that. It was an amazing sort of insight to me. And so those of you that sort of are the recipients of people trying to sell something, I would say keep that in mind, because many people are just trying to improve their position in a very difficult time. But again, when you are selling, just be mindful of your tone of voice, that it is not, it doesn't come across in the wrong way in a crisis or being trying to take advantage of anything. And I'll quickly talk about this, because I think it's anybody that is involved in a product business. The ordering process is something that is quite critical. I don't want to spend too much time for people that are not involved in a product business or where there's no ordering process. Those that are, and I'll make these slides available so that you don't need to take notes. But think very carefully about the ordering process, because on availability of product, many people are thinking about the supply chain and the fulfillment, but actually it starts with the ordering process, and getting the ordering process right and making sure that the demand is being generated at the ordering process, I think is very, very critical in a time like this with a very broken supply chain. So this is something I would really keep in mind. In terms of the commercial impact, another thing that we've seen around the world is a new need. And that is, I call it confidence. And I would say that I use the word safety and hygiene, and I don't think the vocabulary is quite there, but confidence is very psychological, and you need to win the head and the gut of people. So if you think about an organization like Uber, it's going to be some time before people feel confident to take an Uber unless they really need to. If you have a restaurant, creating the confidence for people to come and sit in your restaurant. If you're an airline, having the confidence that people can be safe on your airline. There is a whole new lens that everybody is looking at this. Now, this is going to create a lot of business opportunity for people in providing solutions for confidence. And, recently we used to have a business that did the measurement of quality of dealerships around the world. So when the quality of the service infrastructure and the mechanics, the motor dealerships have asked us to actually check out the health and hygiene and the safety of motor dealerships around the world. Are they complying with standards? So if imagine you're running a big franchise business. Normally you would have run programs to check on customer service, but now you actually need to really be sure that your franchisees are running the organization with the kind of health and safety standards, because there are actually a whole lot of new legal liability issues that are starting to emerge. So creating confidence around your business, around your workforce, is, I think, something that's quite critical. And one of the things that we've done is we've implemented an app in our workforce called Remote Connect, where everybody checks in every morning just to see that they're okay. And they answer a few questions. And we've just finished working with Discovery to take their diagnostic questionnaire and put it into our app. So we're hoping that around the world, what we'll have is everybody in the organization basically doing a self-screening every day. And then based on the algorithm that Discovery have, their clinical algorithm, that will yield an answer of whether you should stay at home or go for a test. And so, this issue of confidence is critically important. And, Discovery have started talking about, we spoke about flattening the curve of the virus, but what we're seeing is you can't deal with it at a country level. So now they're talking about flattening the curve in your business. So creating safety, health, hygiene, and flattening the curve in your business, I think is an important thing to think about in creating confidence for your customers. So I'll just talk a little bit about some of the actions that we're taking as a business, and that we have something called our path to purpose, where we have sort of people at the heart, then our clients, then our community, and then the environment. And so our sort of a huge reflex for us was to our people, and thinking about their health, their well-being, and the tools that they've got available to themselves. And I'll just share with you some of the stuff that we've done. But the one takeout that I'll give is, doesn't matter, big business, small business, the power of communication, I think, is absolutely critical in a time like this. And the amount of appreciation that people have got for quality communication is really extraordinary. You know, we would send out these messages and you don't quite know if they're going anywhere. But people really have appreciated it. So we started with comms on hygiene, health, and safety. So really educate. This was sort of in late January, really educating people about the virus. And what we've actually done is there is a Smollan microsite where we've made all of this information publicly available. So actually, if anyone has a business and you want comms on coronavirus, or documentation or brochure, we've actually made this all available. And I'd be happy to share with anybody if they wanted something, but it is all on our microsite and can actually be downloaded. So really thinking about educating people about what this means. Then a campaign of motivation, what we call our real heroes, so the people that are on the front line. And you can imagine what it must be like as a merchandiser in a store, waking up every morning early, making sure that you are clean, getting into a taxi, trying to get to a store around the world, really fighting your way into the store, and then, you know, serving people in very, very difficult circumstances. So unbelievable work and dedication that people have had during this time. And, you know, on our LinkedIn profile, we're continually doing a lot to acknowledge and thank and recognize those individuals that have been on kind of the real front end of this. I would say, you know, health workers have been extraordinary, and there will be a sort of total reevaluation of how we think of health workers post this crisis. But, you know, the people in stores, and not just our people, all the retailers, it's been amazing how they have come together to try and serve customers. Because if you have a breakdown in availability of product, you really have chaos in a crisis. So the supply lines are enormously critical. Then we produced a leadership guide to the crisis in particular, and just really giving specific advice to leaders in terms of how we can manage teams in this crisis. So very specific training that we've given them, and this guide is also published on our microsite. And then a huge amount of comms, all different kinds of comms to our people. So voice notes, videos. I mentioned the Remote Connect app that we have. We actually put a playlist called Quarantunes on Spotify. So we got people from different generations in the business to create a Spotify playlist of the best music of your generation. So that's been quite a cool thing. And then, as I mentioned, to our microsite, which really gives information to everyone around the world of what is happening in the different businesses. And it's quite hard to know, you know, what is effective and what is not effective, but I definitely would say that our people have really appreciated the efforts that we've gone to communicate with them, empower them, help them feel safe with knowledge, and to try our best to motivate and communicate and look after them. And then, you know, specific interventions around learning and development, TED Talks, podcasts, ebooks that people can use remotely. And it's not in here, but we've now started with a wave of stuff for parents at home. So workbooks for kids and tips on homeschooling, and looking at how we can help people with bandwidth at home. Another interesting thing that we did, which is worth mentioning for those that can do this, is we found, I don't know if any of you saw what difficulties there were at month end with the grant payouts and shopping at month end. So that is a very difficult time for people, and many people wait until month end for their grocery shopping. So what we actually did was we did a pay run mid-month, and we paid our people a third of their salary mid-month so that they could do a mid-month grocery shop, which was something that was really, you can do a great service for them, but also for the community by reducing the density of people in stores at month end, which I think is a big challenge our country at the moment, because so many people have to wait until money at month end to shop. Ideas to maybe take away. I see I'm getting a note that my internet connection is unstable. It's coming back. The first, I would say, collaboration. I've never seen the kind of collaboration that I've experienced in the last 4 to 6 weeks. People are just much more open to collaborate. And what is interesting is the collaboration between big and small companies. So the speed with which big companies are adopting small companies. And the reason is that small businesses have the ability to innovate a lot more quickly than big companies. And big businesses are dealing with this crisis and really struggling to create the innovation. So like Bottles and Pick and Pay, the explosion of Zulzi, 60/60 and Checkers. So those people that are in small businesses, there's never been a better time to collaborate with big companies and to think about things that you can do, because people are in a real crisis. The second is digital transformation, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail in a minute. But this crisis is going to change the way, if my opening comment today about how we are meeting for this discussion, if you think about how many people there are, how many people would have traveled to get to this, the venue we would have had to hire, and just the ease and speed and cost with which we've been able to set up this virtual meeting, it might not be quite as good as being together physically, but so it's not necessarily a binary switch from one to the other, but we definitely can do more work more efficiently in a digital way. Even if you think about things like therapy, you're seeing a massive explosion in online therapy, and there's a great website called Ginger, which is a global website connecting therapists and people around the world around things like mental health, which I'll chat about in a sec. And then finally, I think the concept of tone of voice, certainly there are very high levels of sensitivity. So just the tone of voice that we communicate with as organizations, being careful and sensitive about what we're doing and how we're doing it, because things land very differently in an environment like this. And so the quality of your tone of voice and the sensitivity, I believe, can have a massive impact on how your message is received by recipients. So just talking a bit more specifically about digital transformation, and in particular the future of work. And I've had, actually this is something that Joe has been helping me a lot with. Some thoughts on the future of work. The first is thinking about the tools that are being used and the alignment of the tools and the correct use of tools. So there's this explosion of all these tools, Zoom and Teams and email and Outlook, and really trying to think of a strategy of what you want. So I'll give you just some practical things. What we found is we use Teams as a collaboration tool, which is fantastic. But if you've got a meeting with more than 4 people, it's quite disconcerting because Teams only has 4 frames on the screen. So we're using Zoom for meetings with more than 4 people so that we can see everybody, because we found that that makes a big difference. Once you've got more than 10 people, it doesn't really make a difference because you can't see everybody anyway. We're also using Teams to do digital broadcasts and global town halls, which is something that we've never done before. So these new tools are really allowing us to access people in a way that we've never been able to do that before in our remote workforce. The second is a real mindfulness on mental health. And I hope that if there is something that is positive that comes out of this crisis, it's an acknowledgement of that we don't need to make a stigma about mental health, because anybody that has not been experiencing any form of mental health issues in the last 4 to 6 weeks is a robot. I mean, or very unique. So it's rare, what I'm saying. It's pretty, I think all of us have had difficulties from a mental health point of view. And really, if we can acknowledge that mental health is not something that affects some people, it actually affects many, many people. And removing the stigma, and I'm talking about from a business perspective, because I think in a personal perspective it's very different, but we in our organization think very carefully about mental health, even to the point at which for senior executives the organization will pay for psychologists. So we think very carefully about mental health and try and destigmatize mental health as something, but working remotely really amplifies those challenges. The third is the importance of writing and being a good writer. This is a new skill or an old skill that's going to have new relevance. Also, managing yourself and managing others in a remote way is also a new set of skills. So really tooling up for yourself on how you can be better at these sorts of things. And then the impact on real estate and what I would call like the new third space. So we've radically rethought about our real estate strategy as a business and the need for office space. And we had a meeting actually yesterday where we're seeing some companies that actually are saying that they reckon they will use 20% of the office space that they previously used because they've seen the success and actually the productivity of remote working. So if you can get the tools right, if you can get the soft side of remote working right, like mental health and managing yourself and others, the commercial impact can be very, very successful. And I believe that we're going to see an explosion of new third space. People always thought about going to a coffee shop as a third space, but I think you're going to start to see the blurring of restaurant, coffee shop, WeWork, and office collateral as people realize that there's too much space. And I think that this is actually a great opportunity for restaurant and coffee type environments to think more about creating a more hosted environment for businesses or people in business that don't actually need permanent space. And then, I'll end off with some conclusions. And this really is the last slide that I've got. And then I think we can, if we do have any questions, you can post them on the group. And the first is I would say I continue to underestimate the duration and the extent of the impact of this crisis. I guess I am optimistic by nature. And I actually heard a great quote by Michael Katz. He said, we're all going to land up in the same box one day, but the journey there is a bit more pleasant as an optimist. But being an optimist has a disadvantage where you underestimate. And I don't think we want to think of the worst, but I do believe that this is with us for some time and it's going to be more difficult than we think. I believe that you're going to see much more conservative behavior and a flight to quality in the future. And I believe as a society, we've sort of prized efficiency over resilience over the last 10 years. There's been this real drive to efficiency, whether it was private equity companies stripping out cost and capacity out of businesses. And we're seeing how exposed companies are without capacity at the moment. I believe we're going to see a reevaluation of essential jobs, particularly people like nurses and cleaners in the healthcare environment. Those are just unbelievable jobs. And I think those people have not been prized as much as they should have been, doctors included. If I have a look at the amount of time that people study to become a doctor, the jobs that they do, the conditions they work in. I mean, those of you that have got family or friends that are doctors at a time like this, I'm sure you'll agree with me. Even the most valuable doctors, I think, are undervalued in terms of what they do. I believe that collaboration will be higher in the future. Everyone is going to remember what it was like. And we're going to see some permanent changes in behavior and a lot of new skills that are going to be required to be successful in the future. So these conditions will highlight new opportunities, but it's very, very difficult for companies to change, whilst they're struggling. So, and then I think just from a personal perspective, I've probably traveled in the last 10 years. I would say that I would at maximum have had 3 weeks of no travel, and that would have been on a family holiday. And I've had 8 to 10 weeks of not leaving my house and still managed to run the company. And so I definitely think that when this is over, I'm going to leave the house, but I'm definitely not going to be on an aeroplane once a week. So my life and my work will travel. And hopefully we'll have more family time and less travel time. And that can be a new productive way. So I've spoken for longer than I thought I was going to speak. That really is what I have to share with you. Hopefully there are some things that have been of value for you, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions that any of you might have for me. I see that. Let me open the chat. So I have a question from Mike. Does Smollan have a corporate purpose? Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to read you the question.
Okay. Now I've got them open on the Zoom chat, the Zoom chat. So yes, we do have a corporate purpose. In fact, I was going to actually share this because I think it is quite relevant, because it's been something that's that's actually been a key. I'll quickly show this to you. I don't think I can get it up. So our purpose is to create growth and transform lives by connecting people, brands, and opportunities. So, this really goes back right to the beginning of our group. And I think, when my late grandfather started the company, his primary purpose was to transform his own life, because he couldn't actually find a job. So creating growth for our clients and customers and transforming lives is really what sits at the core of our purpose. And we believe this very, very deeply as an organization. I'll just give a quick example of a practical application of this. In our hiring process, at the end of last year, we decided that we wanted to, if just say in South Africa, we've got 25,000 people and a kind of a 13% staff turnover, that is about 3,000 people a year. We thought to ourselves, if we putting 3,000 people through the workplace, are we thinking enough about who we are hiring? We think about who from a qualification point of view and a capability point of view, but we embarked on a project called the Household Hope Campaign, where we said we wanted to hire people who came from a family where there was no breadwinner. And so our HR teams, said, how are you going to do this? And we said, well, let's ask our people for nominations. And in the first 3 months, we had 5,000 nominations for people who were eligible for employment in our business, who came from a family with no breadwinner. And so we've already hired 500 people out of families that nobody was working. And the difference in applying a job to a family that's got no breadwinner and just filling a job is massively transformational. Now imagine if every company adopted this approach where they thought of just hiring somebody from a family that didn't have someone working, that the impact that we would have on communities just would be amazing. And it doesn't really cost you anything more. So that's kind of, that is the concept of connecting people, brands, and opportunities. Next question, do I see virtual selling as a trend and seeing a sales need shift from hard sell to solution selling? Well, I'd like to talk about virtual selling because I think this is a great point. Because in India, for example, we had beauty advisors in stores. One of the big cosmetic businesses in India is called Lakme. It's a color cosmetics business. Now, obviously in a lockdown, you know, beauty advisors can't work. They can't demonstrate cosmetics. They can't sell in store. And you're talking about thousands of young women who are demonstrating cosmetics. So we turned those into, I wouldn't quite call it telesales, but they had their customers and they had their relationship with their customers. And so they started virtually selling. And that we've actually found that it has been unbelievably successful. Much, much more successful than we would have thought. So the concept of virtual selling or selling via Zoom, I believe is actually something that is quite viable. In the UK, our sales reps were not able to visit stores. And so we said, well, why can't you make a sales call using Zoom or Teams? And funnily enough, in some instances, people in stores prefer to see someone because they don't have to worry about the meeting. You can schedule it. It's easy. It's efficient, much less travel. So I think I really believe that there will be an explosion in virtual selling as a trend. And I think it's a fabulous opportunity for companies. And I sort of feel that part of the reason why I was forced to travel so much is in a way, you thought it was impolite if you didn't turn up personally. It was, it was almost like you didn't have enough respect for people that if you weren't there personally. But I think now people have got accustomed to a different way of working, and we will be able to meet and talk and conduct business and transact, particularly if this goes on for 12 to 18 months, people will get very used to it. So really thinking about that as a way of working, I think is a great idea. Question from Ernest, will companies be more profitable or less profitable once the dust settles? I think that the economy is going to contract. I mean, that's what we're seeing. So I believe companies will initially be less profitable. Certainly, I think that will be the case for our company. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, this is not, I don't know any companies that this is good for, or very, very few, if you want to call it that. Then Russell asked, what do we think about before we enter a country, and how much does the African continent feature in the future? So what we've thought about in a country is the level of maturity of retail, the size of the population, and how interested a big consumer goods company would be in that market, like a Unilever or a Diageo or a Procter & Gamble. So those have been the sort of screens that we had. And that's how we started building the business around the world. And Africa was the last kind of geography that we really started developing over the last 3 to 4 years. So the key for me is think about it like gardening. If you are going to plant a plant, you have to think about, will the soil be good? And what constitutes fertile soil for expansion? That has been the way that we've thought about the expansion. I believe that Africa has got great opportunity, but the markets are still very, very small. And it's actually quite expensive for companies from South Africa to do business in Africa. And if you think about the cost of an air ticket to Nigeria, it's less expensive, and well, whether it's easier now, but you know, in the old world, it was less expensive and actually easier to get to Mumbai than it was to Nigeria. So, you know, when we think of Africa, it's just the same landmass, but it's actually quite far away and not so easy to get to. So the logic for Africa, I think sometimes we've sort of just defaulted there because we're on the same continent, and that's a human condition. We sort of look at maps and we think it's easier to get there, but it's actually a lot easier to get to some other places than it is to some of the African continents. The question from Dean: in the new normal, where retailers are preventing our merchandise from entering stores, how are we adapting to still be able to maximize brand principles? Well, what we're finding is that the retailers are not really preventing our merchandisers coming into stores. They actually, you know, they're very grateful for the help. I think that there's certain categories of merchandisers, like roving people, that they will be less inclined to allow into the stores, but certainly the permanent people that are kind of part of their teams, they're welcoming them and really treating them as part of their team. So that is working quite well. But the question is a good one, is in terms of saying, how do you, where you don't have physical access to an environment, how do you make sure that your brand has the ability to perform? And particularly where we are not allowed into the stores is in the demonstration business and those sorts of areas. So what we're seeing is a rise in sort of virtual demonstration and thinking about alternative channels for sampling and things like that. Then there's a question from Nick on impact on cash flow and profit from demand and supply constraints. So I think simply, you know, there are two things. One is everybody is experiencing some form of corporate trauma, if you want to call it that, in terms of cash flow. So, you know, thinking about your debtors is very important, much, much more so than you would in any other time. And being much more on top of debtors and talking to your debtors and making plans where you have to. So making sure you're collecting the money, and then, you know, managing the cost base. And obviously this is the most traumatic, particularly when you're dealing with people, you know, how you manage that, and being very adaptive to the to the government support programs that are available, and actually they are working. So, you know, if you are not aware of them, you should be you should find out what they are and take advantage of them, because I think that is a huge help in a time like this, and they are actually working and paying out. Tone of voice in terms of question of in your family and friends, I think definitely in your family and friends as it is in business. And so tone of voice in business, but trying to be patient, trying to be kind. I mean, I even think about my parents, you know, and their needs, and, you know, they're isolated and you know, not seeing their friends. And so, you know, it's tough at, you know, at the end of a day when you've been on sort of screens the whole day, you haven't, you know, funny enough, many of us are working harder than we've ever worked. You kind of got a little gap. Your mom and dad want to chat, trying to be patient with them and, you know, thinking about everybody's needs. I think this is a time for, in addition to tone of voice, just being more mindful and more patient and being as kind as you can possibly be. And definitely, those people that are not meditating, take up meditation, because it is helpful, either very or marginally, but it's not unhelpful. That's what I'd say. So even if you do a 3-minute meditation, I think it can help you. Which then Tessa asked, global business technology companies growing, anything that is in sort of digital enablement. So, you know, I mean, Microsoft you're seeing is doing very well. Zoom, all the online video conferencing. But despite that, they're all having to give away a lot of free product and do a lot of promotion. And everybody is under pressure to provide services for low or no cost at a time like this and do their bit. So tone of voice, the last question is, and I think when we got 1 minute left, Bren, and I'll hand over to you. What should we sound like? for me, if you are in business, being very mindful and extra sensitive of what people are going through and really thinking about what you say and how you say it before you do. Sometimes reaching out to help somebody can be interpreted as trying to take advantage when you actually are trying to help. Being mindful of the real and difficult trauma that everybody is going through, and erring on the side of caution and sensitivity, and I think this is a time to be as caring and to collaborative and facilitating as you can possibly be. So that's what I would say. And yeah, well, I guess let me conclude by saying thank you guys for listening to me. It's kind of weird, presenting in a format like this, but I hope it was useful. And Bren, thank you for inviting me. And yeah, I wish you guys all well. Be careful, stay safe, and look after yourselves and those people around you.
David, I'd just like to take a moment just to thank you for your time, and during this difficult period, when you're the head of such a large organization with such a dynamic team, that you've been open and honest and delivered this really beautiful message around communication on how best to navigate through this period. So thank you from ORT Jet, most appreciative, and thanks to everyone for joining us this morning. If you're not on our database and would like to receive future invitations, I'll pop my email address in the chat box, so please email me and I'll add you to the database. And yeah, thank you very much, everyone. See you at the next one.
Thank you, and have a great weekend.
Thank you very much.
Erica, thank you.
Pleasure, Lisa. Thank you, guys. I'll send you the link to our microsite if anyone's interested on the comms, that you can maybe
That'll be
in the presentation.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll wait for everything from you, and then I'll add it to the thank you note to everybody, so they've got everything on one email.
Perfect.
Brilliant.
Awesome.
Thank you
That was
so much,
awesome.
Erica, for your help, and Dave, if you're still there, it was brilliant. Thank you.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Thanks. All the best.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.